This is not for you. Yeah.
This is not for you.
Exactly. I love how we ignore that, like every teenager in every horror film. It's like whatever the rule is, it's like, no, it doesn't apply to me.
Hello, nobody's home. Leave a message after the beep and somebody will get back to you.
I thought you should know that he died today. He closed his eyes and he left here at 12:03.
Everybody that I mention it to upstairs, yeah, I'm doing the House of Leaves panel. It's one of two reactions. Oh, or really, you know, there's no in between on it. Everybody's heard of it and everybody has feelings about it.
Pick up, please. Mom? Hello?
Welcome to our first program on the experimental book, House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski, and the experimental book discussion because I don't know what I'm doing. So let's get started. One of the questions that I had about it was just how is everybody, like what background are you coming from? Like are you a heavy reader, or like I'm more into film, so I'm kind of examining it through those lenses.
No, I'm more of a reader than filmed. I'm a retired school teacher, and I come to the fiction book club meeting once a month here, and Shannon was talking it up, and so I checked out the book and started reading.
I am more like you. I am also into films more so than books. I love to read, but I am a very slow reader, and it takes me a little bit of time to get into a book. But when I am into it, then it's hard for me to put down. But I do tend to watch more films than I do read books.
All right, and we're joined by Evan online. How are you doing?
Hey, Evan.
I am. That's the classic. Yeah. Evan, yeah. I was just on here. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Great tuning in. I'm glad I found you. That's the power of the internet. So yeah, I'm from Canada. I'm actually in a hotel in a small town called Sudbury right now. I'm a musician. A little gig anyway. Yeah. For reading wise, do a decent amount of reading. I like to go back myself. I'm a big fan of the comics medium, so I read a lot of graphic novels, and I read literature when I can. And House of Leaves seem to find me. So yeah.
So real quick survey, like, yeah, I know people at the library, they come up to us during summer reading and they're like, yeah, I was reading the ebook of this and it got sent back and I didn't get through the last chapter. Is that okay? I was like, we're not gonna go check on it. But people look at librarians like we're, you know, the school teachers that are going to condemn you for not. So did everybody get through the ninth chapter? Is that where everybody stopped, or have you read the whole book? Or
currently when I open up, I'm on page 410, but sometimes I find myself on page 540. Sometimes I'm on 630. Yeah. No, but it's sequentially, I'm on is that 18? Chapter 18. So I have made it through the labyrinth successfully. I don't know if it was successful. I really don't know. I still am thinking about it, but yeah, that's how far I am. How about yourself?
Yeah, I stopped at chapter 9 yesterday because I was cramming for this program.
This morning.
Yeah, and chapter 9 was a rough one.
Well, I'll say, I started reading this book years ago, like maybe, like not a few years after it came out. And judging by where I had something stuck in it, I had made it about to the end of chapter 9 that time. But I've reread those chapters. But
I'm like you. I started in 2009.
Yeah, I picked it up because I was paging at the time, and so this one I would shelve it a lot, and a lot of times what I do is just kind of flip through something, and this is a book you get a sense of it when you flip through it, and you're like, why is the word house in blue? Why are the pages a little bit longer than the cover? And So I've always been fascinated by at least the concept of it. How is everybody reading the book? Like the approach I'm taking is I go through the text, and every time there's a footnote, go down, look at the footnote, go back, or if it says, go read the whale's toe letters, it's like, okay, I put the
Oh, yeah,
bookmark
those were-
here.
yeah.
So that's the approach that I'm taking. Is anybody doing anything different?
That's
Yeah,
exactly what I did.
So I feel like I'm reading two books at the same time, you know?
Right, because you're reading the whole,
You're reading
his-
through it.
Johnny's story is
yeah.
like a whole different,
Mhm.
Yeah,
you know, he makes comments on the manuscript, but then he's telling his own story about.
It's like 3 different novels happening at once.
yeah, and I'm frustrated because the story I want to be reading is about the house.
Yeah.
you know,
Yes, yeah.
And yet I'm afraid not to read Johnny's story because I'm afraid I'll miss something that's vital. So I'm reading them both at the same time, but I'm frustrated. I want to get back into the hallway.
Has he said anything vital though, up to this point?
No.
That we know of?
Not
Yeah.
this
Not
point.
yet.
Up until there,
But-
yeah.
And I
It could be a
honestly, I
time.
kind of got a little curious about his life because mostly when I went forward and read his mother's letter,
Yeah, the
because-
letters were
because,
hard.
you know,
Yeah.
she was talking about, you know, I didn't mean to hurt you and all this. And so, yeah, I mean, I kind of figured it, you know, earlier when he's telling stories about how he got these scars on his arms and stuff, that wasn't the story, but,
That is the thing for me though, is this going to be relevant in the end? That frustrates me, not knowing for sure, especially as an unreliable narrator, whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it is. I mean, I get the feeling that it is because I think he's going crazy.
Mhm.
And I think he's going crazy because of reading the old man, what's the old man?
Zampano.
Zapanio.
Yeah, Zampano.
Yeah.
I think his papers are making
Ed.
Johnny crazy,
Mhm.
and the house is what made Zampano crazy. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's all gonna be connected somehow, but I don't have a clue as to how. I'm just massively confused, really.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of wordplay too, I find. Like, I think that's part of the thing. I think like the further I've gone down, because like some things I've obsessed a bit more, and some things I don't. And I don't know why. I just do. Like it could be some words, or it could be like a concept. I'm like, is that a anyway? I could. It's this whole thing that really gets messing with the brain. But yeah, like even some of that, maybe it's just an example of like Johnny showing that like some things in his life are real and some things aren't. So maybe there's a connection that like, okay, I think it was something to do with like karate, and that's like the more fun version. I think sometimes people too, like when we tell stories, you ever seen the movie Big Fish? It's kind of like,
Love that movie, yes.
and it's sometimes more fun to elaborate the story, because I think he says something like, yeah, this is the story, but this is really what happened, but no one actually wants to know that. So then it's the whole idea of like fact and fiction, and then I don't know, and this is like what's more entertaining, or like what is real, what is the truth. So you kind of
It's
play
like
around.
Life of Pi too. If you've
A
ever
lot of like
read it.
existentialism too, like the house.
Yeah.
It leads you some places, yeah. So
Well, and he's also hallucinating, you know,
Yeah.
a good bit of the time, so you don't really know what's really happening.
I will say I have lost interest in every sex encounter that he has.
Yeah, I'm a little bit tired of that too.
But the only thing that kind of occurred to me is that when the stripper that he has the thing for,
Thumper.
when she told him, when she told him you need to get out
Hmm.
more, well, that's when he really started. There's this whole chapter of girl after girl, and it's like that's his way of doing that. Is like, you know, but it's not helping him, because after all this whole series, then he has some of the worst hallucinations yet, you know. So that's.
yeah.
I will say the fact that every woman that he encounters is someone that he's very attracted to, and she's willing to go to bed with him. I'm beginning to think that these are not actual events that are happening.
Okay.
Like, these are ideations in his
But
head.
although a couple of them are people who read to Nathaniel,
Yeah.
you know, his readers, so a couple of them are people he looked up, he contacted.
Well,
From that
he
list.
contacted them, but did he really?
Well, I know, yeah,
You
right.
know.
Yeah, you have the index too. I think I noticed a few of the names actually. Like there's an index. I'll show you what page their name shows up. I think it's like Ashley. Or I forget some of the other ones. Alicia. And then you're like, wait, which one's that again? I think some of the names kind of sound similar. Like there's like an Audrey there, and like, wait, which one's that again? Is that the real estate agent or is that one of the girls? It's in designed
Ashley
a way
is
to
the
make
one
you
that he
confused as
doesn't-
the reader.
He says he doesn't.
He doesn't even
remember.
know where he met Ashley. She called him and left a message on his answering machine, and he doesn't have any idea who she is. But
Oh,
he
yeah.
still meets up with her.
It's not
Yeah.
very discriminating.
Did anyone ever feel claustrophobic sometimes with some of the pages? Or it felt like you had to read, like, are any of you the type of readers you feel like you have to read all the words on a page? Or when you come to the section where it has all the photographers and you're like, okay, I get it. There's like 200 names here. Do you read all the names or do you just go, okay, I get it, next?
Yeah.
Well, I'll say, I kind of like Googled for like how, you know, anything people were saying about how to read it and what to, and I saw this whole thread on Reddit, and somebody said, well, you know, when he gets into just lists of things like that, you know, you don't really have to read
No,
those.
I skip
But-
over the list.
But, you know, but they said sometimes if you just kind of skim over it and that something kind of does pop out a little bit, you know, but I've kind of ignored those. And then, you know, in chapter 9, when it got to the mirror part, you know, after the first couple of those that I read, I thought, oh, this is just another list. And then the next page, it was the mirror image. And so I skipped those.
And the stuff that's in a foreign language that I don't
Right.
understand,
Oh, yeah.
there's no point in me trying to read that.
Latin,
you know?
French, like what? Yeah.
Yeah.
But then when he's got a footnote to another footnote, you know, it's
Mhm.
like he's got a footnote and then there's another footnote to that footnote, you know. That's, you know.
It was like, see chapter 18. It's like, okay, no, I'm not going over there.
Well, other than the letter,
Yeah.
every time it's referred to anything in the appendix.
The Lyle or
it-
something?
It says it's missing.
Yeah,
So,
but the letters were, I thought the letters were, that was one of the most interesting
Mhm.
parts to me.
it was,
Oh.
and it was also the whole thing about his hallucinations. Is
Yeah.
that toward the end, she's writing to him and she's saying, did I really write all these letters to you? And you don't know if somebody's just messing with her head, you know, or if she really just imagined writing all those letters that she thinks
Oh, I
that she
think
wrote to
she's
him.
really crazy.
Oh, no, I think she's crazy, but whether she actually wrote the letters or imagined that she wrote the letter. Because so many of the letters she would write, she'd say, why don't you write me back, you know?
Did everyone read the letters? Do we all know what happened?
Yeah, we-
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask. Have
Okay,
you looked
yeah,
into
yeah.
the other book, the Wellstowe letters? So after, and I don't, if you, I don't. know.
Oh, there's
Someone-
another book? He
There
wrote
is
another book?
there is a companion book called the Wellstowe Letters that includes some of what's in House of Leaves, but then has a little bit extra too.
About the mother or?
It's the mother's letters, yeah.
Oh,
Is there anything that we need to know?
I don't know. I've not looked
Probably.
into it. I know it's a companion. But no, I'm interested though.
Yeah, I did some searching as well. I think I ended up on a forum. I did, yeah. And then there was some like secrets in there that you could find if you look further. Like there's like even one of the things she said, there's like some code. Remember, it was just like word after word. I'm like, what are we reading? It like didn't make any sense.
I think it was like you just take the first letter of each word and
Yeah.
I Googled it. And,
Yeah, same. Yeah.
yeah, and she was describing like being raped over and over in it.
Yeah. Oh, those,
But then the implication is that that didn't actually happen when Johnny's talking to the staff afterwards.
yeah. Notice
Yeah.
the community seems like it's really tight knit as well, really like well protected. Like I found like even when I was doing searches, like it kind of carefully brings you places not to give too much away. A lot of the people online like allow the individual to come up with the answers themselves. I found that I was like, I never really experienced that before with a book before. It feels like a really unique community of people that
Well,
come together and discuss
another
it.
thing that I read, and so is he the only one who's read ahead of chapter 9?
Yeah.
When you get past chapter 9, are there any instances where it tells you to go and read another? Not go to an appendix, but to actually go read another chapter out of order?
It might just reference back like a page and it'll say like this concept and it might remind you of that.
You had
And then it
commented
gives
on that
you
Reddit thing
context
that
for that again. But I don't think another chapter, I don't recall, no.
read the chapters all in order and not go to another chapter when it tells you, you know, like it was like there was gonna be a point that told you to read a chapter out of order. And so I didn't know.
I didn't do that. I
hasn't
thought
happened yet.
following the footnotes and the 3 different stories and
That's enough.
and that was plenty for me. I was not gonna go read another chapter.
Well, my feeling is that Johnny is ultimately the protagonist of the story because everything else is Zampano is Johnny saying, he tried to cross this out, I'm putting it back in. Is it, I don't know what he means here. And so it's Johnny's story as well as the story of Johnny's reaction to the documentary and Zampano's commentary on it. What do y'all think about the character of Johnny?
He makes me kind of sad.
He's a
You know, I
tragic
mean, it's
character.
sort of a-
Yeah, he's tragic, definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's very like hedonistic, very like pleasure seeker type.
But then sometimes he's so insightful in his notes on the manuscript that, you think there must be a pretty high intelligence there that's kind of gone to waste or.
Well, and considering his background, you're amazed that he's walking around and functioning, I mean, his background has been just horrific. If it really was a pit fighter and all that. Well, if he really did go to Alaska when he was 13 years old and work in a canning factory, I mean.
His foster family, tough relationship with his parents. I think one of his foster fathers was not the nicest to him either. He got pretty hardened. He seems like he's got a lot of soul searching, a lot of exploration still to do in himself. Maybe he's part of the loss too, because like you can almost like there's that connection of like being lost, being lost in the house. Like maybe Johnny's lost in parts of his life. He's trying to explore and find himself. There's moments of him that's great. I think he shows like good ethics, good virtues. I think he tries to analyze good versus evil sometimes himself, and he's not quite understanding that. It's very soul searching, very very like existential. Yeah.
I think Danielewski writes Johnny as a really interesting writer some of the time. Like Johnny's text has sort of a poetic quality to it where whatever point he's making, he'll dance around it and imply it without actually saying it. And then he's got these passages where they're just these run-on sentences and I'm like, I'm losing track of this, but I know if I skip ahead, I'm gonna have no idea where you are. And he does this thing that I noticed once and I just thought it was a typo, but then he's doing it over and over where when you say like, I could have done that.
Yeah, that I was just thinking that.
I know, that was bothering.
Yeah. And I couldn't decide whether is this intentional, is the author illiterate or is the author making us know that he's illiterate? I don't know, but yeah, that really
that's been bugging me too.
I haven't noticed it in any passage that Johnny wasn't writing, so I haven't noticed it not happening either.
And other than that, grammatically, it's fairly sound. It's that one thing that just he keeps on and on with could have, should have, done have.
And some moments where he has like bad when starts hearing sounds or something starts happening, it's interesting writing. I feel like you could really get like inside of the character's head. Like I sometimes I could feel his anxiety or his panic. Maybe not like fully, but like in a sense that like it really comes at. It's a very intimate reading experience. I don't know. Like sometimes I felt like Johnny's even talking to me as the reader, or like Sometimes I could feel what he's going through, even though I'm not actually fully going through what he's going through, but maybe parts of me relate to him. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, something like that.
And also, he's very empathetic with Zampano.
Zampano.
Yeah.
You know, he's really, when he writes about how the old man must have felt, it's very insightful, I think. You know, being blind and being alone and the cats. I mean, he goes out and visits with the cats. And then when he dies, all the cats go away.
What do you think about
That's-
Lude, his friend?
Oh,
He doesn't really leave much of an impression except just to get Johnny out of the house and
Yeah,
into
I
a
think-
bar.
I think
Yeah.
he's just he's almost a foil, you know, he's like he doesn't really think, he just sort of drinks and picks up girls and calls Johnny, you know, but that seems to be his only function.
And it's kind of like he likes the novelty of the stories that Johnny tells about his past that kind of, you know, make the girls interested.
Yeah,
you
but
know, a
like I
little
said,
bit. So
that
it's
helps him
like
pick up
you're right,
girls.
it's almost like he's, you know, using him as a sidekick for, you know, that.
What do you think about him?
I think he reminds me of the kind of friend like there's a saying called like a good time Charlie. My mom taught me that. It just means someone who's always there for a good time, you know. But it sounds like even though Lude, I think, does care about Johnny and like looks after him, you know, wants to know this friend's okay, but he doesn't like ask or do any insight to like really find out. And I don't think he can fill that role for him. Whereas I think maybe Johnny looks to someone like Thumper to either be that like more motherly figure or someone that can like help him with more of his mental stuff. And I don't think Lude can be that for him, even though he is a really good friend, but he's not fully like a confidant, like as someone you can really trust with like what's actually going on for him.
He doesn't seem like a very deep person, and sometimes you need a shallow friend in your life just to kind of pull you out of it and say, look, everything's cool. You just, you know, go out and enjoy the moment. But then sometimes you need someone who will go into a dark place with you. And I don't know if that's ultimately what the issue with the house is about, like a soul search or something, but not
I
to
don't know,
skip ahead there.
I'm kind of ready to get back to the house. I mean, you know, we kind of.
Yeah, I'm always glad when it gets back to that
Yeah,
storyline after.
and that seems to be a minor part, you
Okay,
know.
and so here's something, and I probably totally missed this from the very beginning, but the actual manuscript that is, you know, describing this film.
Mhm.
Did Zampano write that?
That's the impression that he already dictated it to.
Right, based on seeing the
Yep.
film.
Seeing the
Yeah.
documentary that nobody can find.
Right,
Which-
but if he's blind,
How did he say that?
And obviously you can't get the echo from the
because
films.
and because he's talking about, you know, this is what you see, and, you know,
Mhm.
so it's like, how did he write it if he couldn't see the film, if the film ever existed, or is he just, did he make the whole thing up, you know?
But at the time when we're reading that part, we don't know he's blind.
Mhm.
We haven't found out yet. that
Right.
he's blind, you
But,
know?
But, so it's got the layer of his footnotes though, or just his footnotes on his own
Mhm.
text, and so that's like normal footnotes, like.
Well, and here's one thing that occurred, I wondered about that too, and I wondered, we aren't ever told how long this guy's been blind. We don't know
Right.
whether he's
I haven't
always
always.
been blind or whether something that he saw in this maybe documentary is what caused him to go blind. You know, I mean, I don't know, that's just sort of a crazy supposition, I guess.
Evan, since you've read ahead, do you have any insights on this?
I wasn't entirely sure. Like I didn't actually really think about, because it's weird. When you think about like now that we've read it, maybe we start to understand like like each story a little bit more. Like when you're thinking about which you are, like, okay, I'm in the Naviton house. Oh yeah, that's the documentary that was fictitious, made by, okay. And then you go to that place. Um, but it's weird. Does that mean like I didn't actually consider the fact that maybe he was the director of the movie or he's just writing about the movie? Like, does that mean that the movie doesn't exist? Does that mean Will doesn't exist? Now I'm thinking about it now. So I don't know. But he's blind. What?
Right?
Now my head hurts.
Yes. Stay tuned for all of us.
I am already resigned to the fact that they're never going to give any sort of explanation as to why this house is opened up into an interdimensional.
And that nobody really seems very surprised. I
Mm.
mean, they, you know, the wife, Karen,
Oh,
keeps
I
saying,
know.
let's call the police. I mean,
What are the police gonna do?
yeah.
Yeah, I know, it was kind of funny when she said that, and he goes, well, what are they gonna do, come and like arrest somebody for building a room onto our house? But,
And at one point, they do call the police. The first time, the first door appears and the police come and say, well, we can file a report. But I mean, what?
when the hallway opened up after the closet, you know, when the hallway appeared, I think I was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But yet nobody's in any hurry to leave. I mean,
well, and then there was the one scene that was, and I think it was almost like a short chapter, where the dog and the cat ran in to the hall, and they, you know, like, we're about to go in after them or something, and then suddenly they were in the backyard. And then they never went back to that. You know, it was like, wait a minute. Did anybody a little curious about how that happened, you know?
Went and smoked a joint. Maybe a cat and a dog was there. Maybe one of the kids.
and maybe they're just all smoking a joint all the time. Maybe
Yeah.
we need to be smoking.
Somebody besides the brother who, yeah.
Yeah, when they go out into the yard, when the I can't remember anybody's name, when the guy in the wheelchair first
Oh,
arrives.
is it Reston?
I wrote his name down. Yeah, Reston.
It starts with an R.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, rested and
Billy
rest.
Reston.
Sometimes he uses the
Yeah.
same word kind of similarly. Like he'll play with like restaurant and then you'll see restin and then he'll use the word rest and you're like, does that mean anything? Like what was it's a weird kind of way of writing. It gets in your head. Okay, it got in my head a little bit.
Whole thing about measuring the house when, after the hall opened up, and all this measuring, and they were saying it was like a quarter of an inch, you know, and then they measured, someone else's nose 5/16 of an inch. Well, how do you measure the inside unless you know to that exact, without knowing how thick the wall is?
Oh, they drilled a hole through the
They drilled a hole through the wall.
wall.
Okay, I missed that then. Okay, it was like, how they, you know, okay.
What I never understood what got them started on the quarter of an inch. I mean,
If you got a whole
moved in-
hallway in there, then why is a quarter of an inch bothering you? It's
Yeah.
like, why not 8 feet? You know?
when you move into a house, do you automatically measure the exact dimensions of the room and then go measure outside to see if it matches?
I think he just noticed something. I know something stuck out, and he's like, I forget how he began to do that. I wouldn't do that. I might notice that the floor is crooked and be like, I'll roll a ball down.
Now,
Be
when
like,
the books fell off the bookshelf, that got their attention, and that would have gotten my attention. And that sort of puzzled me at first, because when I envisioned that Karen and her friend were building the bookshelf, I was envisioning they were building a freestanding bookshelf.
But
But
it was from
apparently
wall to
they
wall.
just were building shelves onto a wall so that it was open on the end, or it wasn't open on the end. It was not supposed to be open on the end, but it was supposed to go up to the wall. But then when the book fell over, it fell off and didn't fall up again. Now I think that would is something that would have gotten my attention, but the quarter of an inch difference in the inside and outside, I just kept thinking, who cares? I mean,
I kept noticing the K, and even I think the letter K was a footnote a couple times. And then someone hypothesized that maybe like part of the K, it's like you can almost be like, this is a labyrinth, and then and now I can't see the letter the same ever again. And sometimes like the K will be a little bit more bold too. It's kind of like the K in Karen. You kind of make these connections between the letter. I don't know. Could be a fact.
Thinking of chapter 9, there was a little check mark down in the bottom.
I was gonna
Oh,
ask,
yeah.
I started flipping through to see if there was another one.
But you notice the book too? The front is slightly smaller. That's another book's design, like it's bigger inside than it is on the outside, kind of like the house.
It's like the
Book is designed like the house. Yeah.
I'm just worried that like someday it's going to be revealed that Danielewski wrote this book just to troll readers.
yeah.
That's what I was thinking, going back to what Evan was saying with the word rest and how he kind of plays around with that. How much of that by the end of this book are we going to realize that's just Danielewski kind of screwing with us,
Yeah,
you know, like
Holloway. I mean, has anybody figured out Holloway, the hall and away? I mean, really away, away down the hall.
I will say, if he's trolling us, though, he went through a whole lot of trouble to do it, and that's intriguing enough to me.
Yeah.
ended up with
It was crazy the Easter eggs that you can sometimes find. I think that's what some people were saying. And I think one of you was touching on some of the lists. Not every one I did like obsessively, even though I did obsess to a certain extent. Did go somewhere into the rabbit hole. But I think it was either the photographers or on chapter 9 specifically. It actually ended up teaching me a lot. I wanted to read all of the architect buildings, and I looked some of them up, and then I think some of the documentary makers, which is crazy that we now have Google, because I think Google wasn't even as powerful at the time that it is now. But these ones were all real, and it's just like it's like kind of the mind was like, did he actually know all this, or did he just like read them in a book and then make the list? Because if you do go down those paths, it can take you somewhere else, and it's like all these aspects of historical, like real stuff that's involved, and it's just the amount of layers and depth is crazy.
Yeah, and this first list, I'd start it, and then I'd get to a certain point, I was like, okay, this is just a list. But then I almost felt like, well, I need to further down because it might start some text again.
Yeah.
Let me check in with it every
Yeah.
couple
Yeah,
of
these people existed. I'm like, holy, like there's so many.
And the historical little stories, like the Skylab mutiny. I'd never heard of that. And I don't know whether I was under a rock at that time or what, but that was just fascinating to me. I had to go read about that.
Because you took some tangents as well, like outside of the source material, like maybe like all of a sudden it taught you about something. Like I looked up Henry Hudson.
I did.
I've been to Hudson's Bay. I'm from Canada, right? So no, but yeah, like, and then you learn about that. I'm like, wow, like that taught me something else that I would have never known had I not read this book.
And like you said, well, without Google, it would have been very difficult, because I mean, this is the kind of book I would have read with the dictionary beside. Now I just have my phone beside me and look up the words and look up, Henry Hudson and look up the Skylab story, but yeah, I mean, it's all very interesting, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I still want to get back to the house, which I guess he's doing deliberately. I mean,
those sections feel like they read a bit more like a traditional book.
yeah.
And it's like when he's not, yeah, that's really horrible right there, but here's a history lesson.
Yeah.
Not
Oh yeah. Extensive one too, that if you want to learn about it, you might need like 3 hours to learn about it. Not just like, oh, give me the quick facts. It's like, nope, information overload. Here you go.
Yeah, and the footnotes are going to have footnotes.
Okay, there's no way to really just read this book. You have to literally study it. It's,
Has anyone else ever read or seen a movie or anything where it had a structure like that, where there was a discrepancy in size from the inside and outside?
Doctor Who.
Well, oh yeah, Doctor Who. I didn't think about Doctor Who, yes. But there's a podcast that I listen to, and I haven't in a while, but it kind of went into like a house that, like a little cabin in the woods, that when somebody went in, and it was.
This was a fictional podcast?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Tanis.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and so they're, talking about this happening with one of the, cabins out in the woods, but then they reference, legends like, Baba Yaga and
Mhm.
her hut, and that it was, the house that's on the chicken legs, and that it's bigger on the inside than on the outside. And so, yeah, I was just, I think about those kind of things.
Yeah.
But none of those has been anything like where, and other than the staircase, they don't mention that it goes down, So it's like that long hall at first is going straight. So if that were, would be.
I wasn't surprised in chapter 9 when was it Jed or Jeb and Wax
Leaders. Yeah.
Yeah, but they left Holloway down. They climbed up several floors, and then they bumped into him again. And I was like, okay, well, that's
Flares
the thing
around.
that-
Yeah.
How do you get up there? How do you get past them? Yeah.
I think they have like a Hansel and Gretel type like trail with like flares and things. I think they have like, yeah. They told us all the things that the house isn't and all the things that it doesn't have. They never told us what it is. Here's all the things it's not, but here's.
Well, and one thing too, the staircase grew
Wider.
Which that occurred to me. I mean, my first thought was, how did Holloway get past them? They were going up the stairway, trying to get away from him, and yet suddenly he was ahead of them, shooting again. But the stairway had gotten so much wider that I guess and it was dark, so I guess he could have gone around them, and they didn't notice.
Yeah, but the distances were changing even because
Yeah.
it said, after they reached the bottom of the stairway and they went out, that then coming back to it, it took them longer than it took, it was farther than it was when they went away. So, and then that coming back up, where they had food cached and they expected to reach the first cache in like 8 hours, and it took 12, something, And so,
And then
so it's like
growling thing had eaten
this is like
it.
every time the growling happens, the distances start changing. Yeah.
I feel like in context of human behavior as well, like it's interesting how they told us those stories of like what actually happened to Hudson, and I think it talked about like actual darkness, like actual black. I think I can recall this myself. One time I did this thing one time. It was like a sweat lodge. When you go inside, literally complete absence of light. And I can't remember the last time I'd really been like that. Sometimes you go to sleep, you're in the dark, but you're not like fully in the dark. You can still kind of almost see. So put it to the context of putting yourself in the mindset of Holloway, who already was kind of like an angry person. I think they were telling us he's a bit more aggressive. He had the shaggy beard. He liked his guns, and then the idea also that he'd been there kind of alone for 4 or 5 days, and I think he was in like pitch blackness, and his reaction to the darkness was like he kind of lost it a little bit there. And they told us those are the people that were on the boats. Like maybe they're actually inherently good people, but as a result of being in that black, in that lack of light, they respond that way. Depending on who the person is. I think Holloway was one of those people who kind of snapped.
At this point in the story, do we think that the all the corridors and everything in the house and the blackness has any sort of good or evil quality to it, or do we think it's just something that exists as it is, and maybe what you bring, very Yoda, it's like only what you take with you, but whatever it is you bring in there gets amplified?
Well, I think the fact that something's growling at them and eating their food
And
is pretty,
scraping the
yeah.
markers off the, yeah.
That, that seems pretty negative.
And
to
then
me.
when Zampano's body was found, there were claw marks in his
Mhm.
floor
Yeah.
and, who knows where that came
Yeah, I
from.
think there's an insidious undercurrent for sure.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is like with Johnny, his hallucinations in the beginning were all, the first few times it was always at the tattoo shop
Hmm.
where he worked. And then the really bad one was at his house, right? Because then he was like saying, seeing all this gore in his kitchen, so, that started happening at home. You
Yeah.
kind of think of maybe like some mental illnesses that may be a place that's kind of affecting somebody but he's taking it with him now,
Well, I think the fact that he took the trunk with papers is what, I think the evil, if
Like
that's.
it's possessed
if
or-
whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
the bad stuff is, went from Zapano to Johnny through the trunk, with the papers, and because he's become obsessed with these papers and pictures and drawings and
he
whatever's
sealed
in
up
there.
his apartment the way Zampano did, the sealed up all the windows
and he
Yeah,
doesn't want to go out. He's become.
it's making him, he's like, he's saying, I also thought it was interesting and, kind of trying to get back to the family in the house that, there was some marital problems. And then because of his background and his, being a photojournalist and all, his instinct would be, he wants to be the one to go in there and, check this out and all. And so he has to kind of, hand that over to Holloway's team. And there's one point when he's a little bit irritated that they named the rooms. They got the anteroom and the great hall, and it was like, this is my house. These people are coming here, but so it's kind of interesting that so far he's, although it left off, that they were going in there to try to rescue them. So he is in there. We just haven't got back to it yet.
Or he's
At
getting
least
ready, yeah.
at least at the end of chapter 9.
Right.
So
Yeah, and Karen she is so adamant that if he goes into the hallway, she's leaving. She's taking her kids and leaving. What the hell is she still doing there to begin with?
when the kids went in the beginning and he went in and got them, did she ever know that? I can't remember now. I have to look back, but where if she knew that he went in after
Yeah.
the kids and how she would have reacted if she had known the children went in there.
She seems really detached too. Yeah. She doesn't even seem like totally motherly to the kids either. Like I think she picks and chooses when she wants to turn it on to like be a mother for them. But she also like, I don't know, it's kind of, it sounds like she wanted to move to the house to like improve something. And the house was going to be the answer for her to like, I don't know, salvage maybe her family or relationship with Will. But she's a troublemaker, that one. Yeah.
And
She's a bit she's a bit of a brat, yeah.
yeah, and the fact that she's just sort of basically unconcerned as long as Will doesn't go through the door, she's happy for all these other people to, take their cameras and their fishing line.
Yeah,
all
and then
this
when
stuff.
she kisses the guy in the kitchen and she didn't go back and erase the tape or anything, so
Yeah.
knowing that her husband was gonna see that, it's like almost like just kind of, calming him or something.
I think every ghost story that I've ever read that had a married couple as like the lead protagonist, they were always having marital issues. I don't know what it is about that dynamic and pairing it with hauntings. I think Richard Matheson used it at least in 3 different novels.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that whole idea that moving there, kind of out into the country or whatever is a way for them to get away from, kind of make a fresh start and fix
Stephen
things.
King
And
in The
then,
Shining, going to the Overlook Hotel,
I think it's just an easy plot point.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just amazed at this woman who seems so uptight about her husband going through this door, but as long as he doesn't go, she's fine. She goes to sleep at night, they knowing all this craziness and the pets go outside and, this non-existent hallway, and she sees that there's no way it could exist, but it does, and that's okay with her as long as Will doesn't go through the door.
it's almost like it sort of irritated her in the beginning that he was giving it so much attention.
Yeah, that he's well, I'm not sure I wouldn't have been irritated about the quarter inch, the measuring
yeah.
the quarter of an inch. I'm thinking, oh.
Yeah. But then, of course, I was thinking, I don't know that I'd complain if there was an extra closet shut in the back.
Well, I also wondered, like, when they moved to this house, what was the intent? Just to sit around and stare at each other, or like, was there a job prospect in the area
Well,
for
it was like
somebody? or-
he was gonna back off of all the travel or whatever, and I don't know what she does. Does she have
Well,
a
he
job?
was going to document their new lifestyle. That was his career move.
But if the house hadn't turned out to be so wonky, that would have been a very interesting.
No, but that's what he was gonna do. He was
Yeah.
gonna document the new lifestyle of living in the country, the marital bliss, the children frolicking, and that's what he was gonna do. I don't know what she was gonna do. And what was her profession? She was
Well, she had been a model. Had she
she
been
had been
a
a model. Yeah, that's true.
But-
Well, wasn't much, not
But I
much.
don't remember if it said that she did anything.
Not much career opportunity there for her.
I did actually like where they acknowledged, if, I don't know if you ever settled on a pronunciation, is Navidson, I think is what I've been calling that.
That's the, yeah.
But if he had faked all this footage, and they estimated it would take, I think, about like $6 million in
Right,
effects
yeah.
to pull it off.
There's no way he could have faked it because he couldn't have afforded the special effects.
Yeah. Wasn't like the Blair Witch Project.
Right. And that's what I've been thinking Blair Witch a lot.
I've been thinking of the Silent Hill video game series.
Never played it, never watched it.
Yeah.
It-
Very
it's, uh,
eerie. Resident Evil
but
4 as well, maybe. Yep.
Yeah, where he's trapped in his own apartment. But the whole idea of Silent Hill, it's a haunted town. And it's not the kind of town where you get punished because you deserve it. It's you get punished because you think you deserve it. And so the town manifests your own fears. And so, like, in one of the games, there's a little girl who walks through the town and she's completely unaffected by any of the monsters or anything because, she doesn't carry adult guilt with her. And so
That's interesting.
I'm kind of leaning towards that idea where all the interdimensionality of the house is something that kind of taps into who the individual person is, and then
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Oh, I'm just feeding off that. Yeah, maybe there's something to that too. Yeah. Yeah, maybe like Holloway saw like some of his darkest fears in representation to like his experience. Maybe the house changed relative to who the person was. Maybe something like that. But to answer your question from before, I remember I look back on this on like, I think it's page 8, 9. When he answered the question, he's like, I just wanted to get a record of us moving into a small house into the country. Yeah, it just kind of had that idea. And maybe also because he was a photographer before, I think he wanted to see what a different medium could create. And he wanted to get that as off the cuff as possible. His photography, he was able to capture, like, I think it told you he took some, I think that's how he met Reston. He took some like photo of him like before something happened. I think he wants to catch like the moving image of that as well. But then it's like he brings his whole family there. It's like, what? I don't know. Is that selfish? Maybe the whole family wanted to go. Yeah.
You know, and then the other thing, and I realize he's doing this because of the hall and everything, but having the cameras in all the rooms, how could you just,
No, he had the cameras in all the rooms before.
even before, because that was, okay, but,
That
so
was
that was
how he
part
did-
of the
that was-
documentary.
Yeah.
But how could you just like be
So there were cameras in
comfortable in your
every
own
room
home
except the
being
bathroom.
filmed all the time? Yeah. Wow.
So I brought this thing down here about half an hour early, just so I could sit with it and kind of get used to it being here. But I'm to the point where I'm ready to not be filmed anymore. And if this book, I guess, was written in 2000, we were really fluent in reality TV by then. And I know that some people have looked at the psychological effects of somebody always being recorded, what that has on them. Yeah, it does tend to bring out some or amplify some negative traits.
The reality stuff like the MTV, the Real People.
Oh, Real World.
Yeah, Real World, and where everybody's always dressed to the nines and in full makeup and, you know, they're slick, as opposed to something like the Blair Witch Project where, you know, they're running through the woods in their underwear, you know, with the camera jerking around. That, you know, I don't know whether he was saying that this particular film, if there was a film, was scruff or slick, because nobody's ever seen it.
I'm really curious where the story is going, because where chapter 9 ended, it almost feels like it's winding down. I don't know if you want to spoil anything.
Yeah, it's constantly context. I think the more there's no one way. I find there's no one way to read it, and I could obsess about that to the cows go home type of thing. I think someone asked earlier. I just want to just touch on that. I think you were asking like what kind of this remind me of. For me specifically, especially in comics, I don't know if you know a guy named Chris Ware. He did Jimmy Corrigan, and then his second work was something called Building Stories. And it was designed in a way it comes in a box and there's 14 different pieces and you can read it in any order. So I think for reading something like that, it kind of, for me, got me a little bit more prepared to read Danielewski. I was still very overwhelmed, you know, to pick this thing up. It took me a while to get into it, but having a little bit more experience, like with something that like does move its train of thought. I mean, I know that's the graphic medium, but he plays on really elaborate concepts that are deep, that can take you
What's
many
his name
different
again?
places. Chris Ware. So he did Jimmy Corrigan, he did Building Stories, and then Rusty Brown. But I'd start with Jimmy Corrigan. Yeah, really cool. But yeah, this it's really affected me. You know, I mean, I bet you coming in here today, but it's great to chat to other people that are also reading it, you know, contemporaneously at the same time. So
Why do you think the title is House of Leaves?
I keep waiting. My only thought so far has been like leaves as in pages. The pages that Zapano had, you know, in the trunk that he
Well,
had.
and sometimes I think about like a table leaf,
Hmm.
like that you put in and it makes it bigger, or take it out and makes it smaller, you know.
That's
This table has a leaf, but, you know, that kind of struck me as.
I was thinking, like, if you actually built a house out of leaves, then of course the leaves would actually decay and crumble at some point, and then you'd go through another cycle where they'd flourish again.
And that's something we haven't talked about, is the fact that all their buttons were falling off. And they're disintegrating. Their shoelaces, and they're having to tape their shoes on. because
Was it like the thread was disappearing that held it on, or
they were just gone.
As it does sometimes.
And the buttons on their clothes were gone.
yeah, and I still haven't figured out why house is blue. I'm still trying to figure that one out. Where that color comes from. I think, do you guys have the like mastered colored version?
Yeah.
House of Leaves, maybe it's like,
Reading anything and you see something in blue, you think it's a hyperlink.
yeah.
You know,
Right.
and it's like,
Maybe some like I randomly just went to thought of thinking like the tree of life or like something to do with like it talks about roots a lot. House of Leaves. If you think about seasons, like leaf is the time of year where like things fall off and then the growth happens again, renewing. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe like house of, and then you could also play with the word leaves too. You could think, okay, leaf on a tree and then leave, maybe like leaving something. Would you be leaving?
Like with house next
You
door.
come in and out of the house. Something to do with exploration, maybe. I don't know.
House, what you leave behind.
Oh yeah. What do you guys think of the echoes? The when they that
Oh,
think of that? That really took me for a loop. I was like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that part kind of made me crazy. Before we end, none of us have introduced ourselves except for Evan, who's wearing Canada.
That's me, yeah.
I'm McCall.
Hi.
and I'm Pam.
How are you doing? I'm Sean.
I'm Stratton.
Stratton.
Yes.
It's nice to meet everybody.
Nice to meet everybody.
It's me, Troll. Yeah, thanks for hosting this. This is great.
Asked to briefly describe House of Leaves, Danielewski has said in an interview that he likes to look at House of Leaves as a three-character play: a blind old man, a young man, and a very special, extraordinarily gifted woman. Now, the question that they ask is, who is the extraordinarily gifted woman?
I don't think that any of the. so far.
He also identifies it as a love story.
I need to get